Well, every week now we have our Share in the Chair moment where you hear Reverend Kevin sometimes inviting you to join various ministries, but we actually hear from our ministers in the congregation, our various lay ministers, what they are doing, often in the church or even beyond. And so today, the person sharing is usually at the 9 o'clock service. He's been to both, but mostly he attends the first service. But he's here for both today to share about what he does and the spirituality of his very specific sort of ministry in the world. So would you please welcome our own Dr. Pierre Bland.
Merry Christmas today.
And I said, Dr. Bland, he is a veterinarian. He has a veterinary practice, and in fact, I think he has an ad in the Sunburst. So if you have pets that you're concerned about, he can be some resource for you. He's also the person last fall, for the Blessing of the Animal Service that provided the snakes that we.
And they let me stay at the church.
Yeah. So. Somehow both he and I are still here, but he wants to talk to you about his various things. So, Dr. Bland, as I mentioned earlier, the Apostle Paul, when he lists various spiritual gifts, and they're not an exhaustive list, they're just some things that he mentions. There are other gifts mentioned in Isaiah and throughout, but there is a list of gifts that the Apostle Paul mentions, and it's the gift of this and the gift of that. But then he comes to a part that he uses plural, the gifts of healing. There are so many ways to be healed and so many ways to administer healing. And it's sort of fascinating to me that you have one of those gifts, that you have the gift of healing animals and families with animals. And so when did you know that you wanted to help animals live well?
Well, I'm one of those fortunate people. I always knew what I wanted to do and was fortunate enough to be able to follow through and do it. Back in the day when we didn't have 24-hour cable television and you had those 3 stations, and on Sunday afternoons you had Wild Kingdom and Bill Burr's Animal World and all those programs and the National Geographic specials once a quarter. You know, I was dead on them. You know, my family knew not to schedule TV time when those things were happening because I was there.
You were going to be watching the animal programs.
That was my time.
Yeah, Mutual of Omaha.
Wild Kingdom. Marlon Perkins, one of my personal heroes.
Exactly. And you had pets also, I guess.
Yeah, I grew up with dogs. Grew up in a very rural area, so we had chickens and cows and horses and a little bit of everything around. Now,
of course, I grew up in another rural estate in the South. And so I know that when you have animals outside running around playing, they having a good time, but they also get knocked up sometimes. They fight or whatever. They chase something and
good choice of words
chases them back, you know. And so when your dogs would get hurt or injured or scraped up or whatever, did you ever want to fix them? Did you ever try to fix them?
Yeah, I was the one who had the bandages and spent my allowance on alcohol and things like that, and tried to fix them up when I could.
Did you go to the feed store and get special medicine? Sometimes my dad used to do that, combiotics and whatnot.
Feed store was a little far away, but I raided our own medicine cabinet though.
Oh, okay. I grew up in a less rural area. Apparently, we had a feed store and a stockyard. Tell me, why do people and pets form such beautiful bonds? Why is that?
I think it's that situation that you always hear, how we're always told that the way to find yourself is to reach outside of yourself. And sometimes that's a bit intimidating to do with each other. But when you can do that with an animal and it's unconditional, and they'll always let you reach out to them, and more often than not, they'll reach back. And it just makes it a lot easier to do.
Yeah, have you seen in sort of like assisted living facilities, nursing care facilities, people who bring puppies and whatnot, and how that?
Oh yeah, and people just their faces just light up because they know they're not going to be judged. They're just going to be loved. It's just pure love.
How is it? Because obviously you're ministering to cats and dogs and lizards and whatever. But people, I mean, I presume most of them don't walk in on their own. I presume people usually bring them into you.
Yeah.
And so your ministry to the animals also ministry to people. How is it that you find yourself ministering to people?
Well, that's very true because I have all these resources from the internet to textbooks to colleagues that I can always call to try to figure out what may or may not be going on with a pet. But it's the people. They come in and they're in various states of frustration, hurt, it's a very volatile emotional situation because something that they care about very much is having a problem. They want that problem solved. And they're worried about finances and they're worried about if their pet's going to be okay. And so I always say that the challenge is dealing with the people, not so much the pets.
Yeah, I know there's a congregant whose pet was not doing well and came to you for a second opinion and rallied, and just what joy that brought to that household.
Oh yeah, and he's a wonderful friend, and so is the pet, and that's part of the joy of it, that it develops into friendships. It becomes more than just a client-patient relationship. A lot of my clients are friends, and I'm very fortunate that in my practice, most of my appointments begin with a hug and they end with a hug.
Oh, nice. Wow. Do you see God's love expressed by animals?
Most definitely. I think oftentimes we see how we can actually express God's love unconditionally, accepting people and situations for what they are, and just using each other to try to get through a situation. And I think animals oftentimes show us the way to that. It's just a matter of us being open and being willing to listen, and that's the challenging part on our part.
Well, you have a very particular healing ministry. Thank you for sharing it with us today. Would you please thank Dr. Bland?
Thank you.